My name is Natalie Carter. I am 34 years old, a major in the United States Air Force, and I flew home from overseas 2 days ago with sand still ground into the treads of my boots and a headache that sleep could not fix. I came straight here, to my parents' house, because my mother said it mattered to her that I show up. She said it was a family milestone. The dining room looked the same as it always had. Same long mahogany table, same framed family photos where everyone smiled a little too hard, same soft jazz music meant to make everything feel warm, even when it wasn't. I sat down quietly, like I always do, folding my hands in my lap. I let the noise move around me instead of through me. My aunt clinked her glass when everyone was seated. She smiled in that way people do when they think they're being kind to a stray animal. "This is Natalie," she said, resting a hand on my shoulder for just a second before pulling it back. "She's the quiet one." A few people laughed softly. Someone nodded as if that explained everything. I felt my shoulders tighten, even though I kept my face still. "She's in the Air Force," my mother added quickly, as if filling in a blank on a form. "But she doesn't really talk about it much. It's mostly support work. Right, honey?" That part wasn't a lie. I don't talk about it much. I've learned that silence is easier than watching people lose interest halfway through a sentence about atmospheric pressure or payload limits. Across the table, my cousin Nolan leaned forward. He was the star of the evening, a newly promoted lieutenant junior grade in the Navy. He wore his dress whites, like a costume he was afraid to crease. "So what do you do exactly, Natalie?" he asked, casual, curious in the way that doesn't expect a real answer. "Paperwork? Logistics stuff? I hear the Air Force is mostly corporate these days." He smirked, a little jab. "Chair Force." I smiled because that's what I've always done. I nodded once because correcting a lieutenant who thinks he knows everything takes more energy than he is worth. "Something like that," I said softly. "I make sure things get where they need to go." "Must be nice," someone else said. "Having something stable, safe." My mother hummed in agreement. Stable. Like a shelf that never moves. Like something meant to stay in the background while the real heroes take the stage. I watched the condensation slide down my water glass and told myself to breathe. None of this was new. I'd been the quiet one since I was a kid. The serious one. The one who didn't need much attention. That was the story they'd written for me, and it fit so neatly that no one ever questioned it. They talked about promotions and engagements. They talked over me, around me, past me. Now and then, someone glanced my way, checking to see if I was still smiling. I was. But inside, my mind was 4,000 miles away. I thought about the flight that brought me home. The hum of the C-130 engines screams against the wind. The calm focus in my own voice as I gave instructions that meant life or death. The way my crew listened to me without questioning, because they knew that when Major Carter spoke, they moved. They had no idea how much was sitting right there with them at this table. And for the first time, I wasn't sure how long I was willing to let that misunderstanding stand. The sky had already shifted by the time we reached Checkpoint Delta. What had started as a mild crosswind turned into a wall of sand stretching across the horizon like a solid gold bruise. Visibility dropped from 10 miles to under 200 feet in less than 60 seconds. The air inside the cockpit thickened with tension. We were 36 minutes ahead of our scheduled drop, carrying critical medical supplies and a 10-man special ops extraction team. The route was clean when we took off, but that storm came out of nowhere. I looked at the screens, then back at the windshield where the desert had turned into a swirling curtain. Command, this is Bluebird 9 requesting alternate route clearance. Visibility deteriorating, I said, into the comms. Static. Then a response, broken and faint. Negative, Bluebird. Hold position. Await. Instruction. I didn't have time to wait. The wind shear was already slapping the tail of the heavy transport plane. We were flying blind and boxed in. To the east was restricted airspace. The dust line. It was a narrow corridor carved out decades ago for emergency-only maneuvers. It cut across hostile territory, barely cleared of debris, flanked by mountain ranges on both sides, and strictly off-limits. Every instinct told me not to enter it. Every protocol said I'd answer for it later. But the storm was closing in like a fist. I looked at my co-pilot, Captain Evans. He looked terrified. "We can't hold," I said. "If we stay here, the turbulence tears the wings off." "The dust line is a kill box, Major," Evans argued. "And it's a career ender. We don't have clearance." I thought about the men strapped into the back. I thought about the crates of blood and plasma we were carrying for a field hospital that was running dry. "I'd rather end my career than end their lives," I said. I reached for the radio. "Command, Bluebird 9, executing emergency deviation, heading 105, entering dust line corridor." I didn't wait for a reply. I banked the plane hard. The second we turned, the aircraft jolted. Crosswinds battered the fuselage. The alarms screamed, "Terrain! Terrain! Pull up!" I silenced the alarm. I knew the terrain was there. I could feel the mountains breathing on either side of us. We cut through the dust line like threading a needle in a hurricane. I flew manually, no autopilot. Just my hands on the yoke, feeling the vibration, fighting the wind that wanted to smash us into the rocks. "Drafting left, 3 degrees, I called out. "Watch the exhaust temp on engine 2. We cleared the corridor 12 minutes later. The storm behind us swallowed the path we came from. If we'd waited 60 seconds longer, we would have gone down. "Command, this is Bluebird 9. We are clear. Mission complete." They didn't respond for a full minute. When the voice came back, it was clipped. Cold. "Acknowledged, Bluebird. Return to base immediately. You are to report to the Flight Review Board upon landing." No mention of the lives saved. Just the airspace I crossed. Back at base, I wrote the report straight. No dramatics, just the facts. The next morning, a sealed envelope was waiting on my desk. Suspension of flight status. Pending investigation for reckless endangerment. The complaint wasn't filed by my crew. It was filed by a staff officer in operations, a man who had never flown a cargo plane in a storm, who cited reckless deviation from protocol. They grounded me. They stripped my flight wings temporarily. They sent me home on administrative leave while they decided if I was a hero or a criminal. That's why I was at my parents' house. Not for a vacation, but to wait for the phone call that would tell me if my career was over. My mother's backyard was strung with lights. Long tables were set up beneath rented tents. It was Nolan's promotion dinner. Nolan had just pinned on his bars. Lieutenant Junior Grade, O2. To my family, he was basically an admiral. He stood near the fire pit in his dress whites, holding a beer, surrounded by admiring relatives. He was talking about the burden of command to an uncle who sold insurance. I stood near the edge of the group, holding a warm soda, keeping my smile polite and thin. My mother floated by. "Natalie, try to mingle. Don't just stand there. Go congratulate your cousin. He's worked so hard." I walked over. Nolan saw me coming. He grinned. It was a patronizing grin. "Hey, Nat," he said. "Glad you could make it. I know getting leave from whatever you do can be tough." "Good to see you, Nolan," I said. "Congratulations on the promotion." "Thanks," he said, puffing out his chest. It's a different world now. Real responsibility. You know, making calls that actually matter. He took a sip of his beer. I bet it's nice in the Air Force, though, he teased. Air-conditioned offices, regular hours. I heard you guys get hazard pay if the coffee machine breaks. His friends laughed. Something like that, I said, biting my tongue. Honestly, I don't know how you handle the boredom, Nolan continued. I need the action. I need to be where the fight is. That's why I chose the Navy. We don't just fly over the problems. We sit in them. I stared at him. I wanted to ask him the last time he sat in a cockpit with an engine fire, but I didn't. I just walked away. By the time dinner started, I was exhausted. Not physically, but mentally. I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of being the nice, stable daughter while waiting to hear if I was going to be court-martialed for saving 10 lives. Nolan stood at the head of the table for his speech. He tapped his wine glass. The room quieted. I just want to say how honored I am to serve, Nolan began. We've all heard stories about courage and leadership. But leadership isn't just about bravery. It's about discipline. He paused for effect. He looked around the room, making eye contact. In officer candidate school, we studied a recent case, Nolan said, his voice dropping to a serious, conspiratorial tone. A mission out of CENTCOM just last week. A transport pilot, some hotshot cowboy, decided he knew better than command. My blood ran cold. He veered off protocol mid-flight, Nolan continued. Took a heavy bird through the dust line, restricted airspace, blind turn, nearly caused an international incident with the hostile border. The guests gasped. My mother shook her head. Terrible, she whispered. Exactly, Nolan said, nodding. They said it was gutsy. But let's be real. It was reckless. It was ego. That pilot endangered his crew because he couldn't follow a simple hold order. He raised his glass. That's not the kind of leader I'm going to be, Nolan declared. I'm going to be a leader who respects the chain of command, who does the job right, not some reckless flyboy trying to be a hero. Applause broke out. My uncle shouted, "Here, here!" I sat there. My hands were trembling in my lap. Not from fear, from rage. He was using my mission, my life, my crew's survival, as a punchline, as a cautionary tale to prop up his own ego. He called me a hotshot cowboy. He called me reckless. I stood up. I didn't mean to. It was like my legs moved on their own. The chair scraped loudly against the patio stones. The applause died down. Everyone looked at me. "Natalie," my mother hissed, "sit down. He's toasting." I looked at Nolan. It wasn't a he, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a knife. Nolan blinked, confused. What? The pilot, I said. It wasn't a he, and it wasn't ego. Nolan laughed nervously. Nat, sit down. You don't know what you're talking about. This is a classified Navy briefing case. Stick to your spreadsheets. It's not a Navy case, I said, my voice steadying, getting colder. It was Air Force Sortie 4 Alpha, call sign Bluebird 9. Nolan stopped laughing. He looked annoyed now. Okay, you heard about it on the news. Whatever. The point is, the guy was an idiot. He broke protocol. The wind shear was 60 knots, I said. The visibility was 0. We had 10 wounded men in the back and 20 minutes of fuel reserves before we hit the hard deck. If we had held position like command wanted, we would have stalled and crashed into the mountain range. The room went dead silent. We? Nolan asked. His voice sounded small. I didn't cross the dust line because I wanted a medal, Lieutenant, I said. I crossed it because it was the only math that ended with my crew alive. I stared him down. And I didn't nearly cause an incident. I threaded a C-130 through a canyon less than 200 yards wide without a scratch on the fuselage. Nolan stared at me. He looked like he was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. You? He sneered, trying to recover his ground. You're a major. But your logistics. Mom said you do support. I am a senior pilot, I said. I have 3,000 flight hours, and I was the aircraft commander of Bluebird 9. Nolan shook his head. I don't believe it. They suspended that pilot. If it were you, you wouldn't be here eating potato salad. You'd be in the brig. He looked around the table, looking for support. She's making it up, Nolan said, laughing uncomfortably. She's just trying to sound cool. Come on, Nat. You fly a desk. My mother looked at me, pleadingly. Natalie, please, don't ruin Nolan's night with these stories. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, but a voice cut in from the back of the tent. She's not making it up, Lieutenant. Everyone turned. Sitting in the shadows at the far table was General Marcus Halloway. He was a retired 3-star general, an old friend of my uncle's. He had been sitting all night quietly, nursing a scotch. He stood up now. He was in civilian clothes, but he moved with an authority that made Nolan look like a child playing dress-up. He walked into the light. General Halloway, Nolan stammered. I was just illustrating a point about discipline. You were illustrating your ignorance, son, Halloway said. His voice was gravel and iron. He walked over to me. He looked me up and down, then nodded with deep respect. Major Carter, the general said, I received the briefing this morning from the War College. He turned to the table. That maneuver she pulled? Halloway said, pointing at me. The one this lieutenant just called reckless? The flight telemetry is being added to the advanced curriculum at the academy next semester. Nolan's mouth dropped open. It's being called the Carter Maneuver, the general announced. A gasp went through the room. It is considered the textbook definition of command courage under extreme duress, Halloway continued. She didn't just save her crew. She rewrote the book on heavy transport evasive tactics. The general turned his cold eyes back to Nolan. So, Lieutenant, Halloway said softly, before you mock a superior officer again, I suggest you check her rack. Because she has more flight, time in combat, than you have time on this earth. Nolan went pale. He looked at me. Really looked at me. He saw the major now. He saw the pilot. He swallowed hard. He set his glass down. His hands were shaking. Major, Nolan whispered. He stepped back. He snapped to attention. He saluted. It wasn't the theatrical salute he had given the room earlier. It was a terrified, apologetic salute to a superior officer he had just grossly insulted. The room waited. My mother looked at me with wide, watery eyes. She finally realized that the quiet one was the loudest person in the room. I looked at Nolan. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just returned the salute. Slow, crisp, perfect. As you were, Lieutenant, I said. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was an email from the Flight Review Board. Subject, investigation closed. Status, cleared for duty. Note, commendation recommended by Jenner M. Halloway. I looked up at the general. He winked. I made a call, Halloway whispered to me. Told them if they grounded the pilot who invented the Carter maneuver, I'd come out of retirement just to fire them. I smiled, a real smile. Thank you, sir, I said. I turned to my mother. I'm leaving now, I said. I have to get back to base. I'm cleared to fly. But the cake, my mother stammered. Enjoy it, I said. I grabbed my jacket. I walked out of the tent, past the stunned faces of my family, past the lieutenant who was still staring at the ground. I walked to my car. The night air felt cool and clean. I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their toasts. I had the sky. I had the truth. And now I had a maneuver named after me. I started the engine. It hummed like a promise. Major Natalie Carter was heading home. And this time, she wouldn't be quiet about it.